Earth Ancients is a sponsor of Cosmic Summit. If you're not familiar with Cosmic Summit, it's going to be held in Greensboro, North Carolina, June 20th through the 23rd. There are a ton of really good people there, and we have one of their keynotes is Dan Richards, who's with us today. He will be presenting on one of those days. We don't know specifically what day it is, but if you're not familiar with Dan, he is a research investigator. His YouTube channel, Debunking, is becoming extremely popular. And I got to tell you, I had to have Dan on the program, not only because he's a fan of Graham Hancock, but he's kind of a voice for reason. And when I say reason, I'm talking about both sides, the academic side, which can get really funky, and the alternative history side, which some people believe is the pseudo-archaeology side, which can be and is, in a lot of cases, very funky. So, Dan, Rich, welcome to Earth Ancients. Great to have you on the program.
Thanks, Cliff. I appreciate it.
I saw your first program on YouTube on Debunking. It was great. It was Milo 1 and Milo 2, which I thought was great. But I love the fact that you're very casual, but point of fact for the most part. What inspired you to begin stepping up and wanting to speak out on these topics?
Well, what really got me was when I watched Ancient Apocalypse, which I was a little late to the party, but I watched it, and I've been a Graham Hancock fan for a long time, but just didn't have a chance to watch Ancient Apocalypse. I watched it about a year later, and then I was like, well, in this modern day and age, of course, you're going to have debunkers. So I went and looked at what they were saying. It was consistently, these guys, they haven't read his stuff. They're responding to individual sentences, small ideas, without having the underlying concepts. And I frequently compare it to debunking evolution by attacking the evolution of a platypus. It's like, well, that doesn't, if some jackass says things wrong, it doesn't mean that I can just go in there and prove evolution's wrong by attacking his ideas without attacking the body of work. And so that got me started doing that, and didn't take long before it became obvious that there was really nobody else doing that. So find fertile ground, you till it. So yeah. Here we are.
Did you read Fingerprints of the Gods back in 96, 97?
95. I had it pre-ordered actually from Hastings. You could pre-order books back then. You couldn't pre-order movies back then for some reason, but you could pre-order books. And
it's funny. I'm here in San Francisco Bay Area, and when that book came out, he came out to Berkeley and he spoke at a bookstore. I had a chance to see him, and I mean, there's like 100 people in the room. His work was so profound to me. It was impressive. I was always kind of a questioning authority person anyhow, kind of a residual hippie, you could say. But I'm curious on your take for him. Do you think he goes out of his way to question the narrative of history? Or is he more of just he used to write for the Economist magazine, so he's not a unsmart person, but what would you say is the appeal of Graham Hancock?
Well, I would say that he thinks outside of the box. I wouldn't say that he goes out of his way to look for an alternate theory. Quite often he will just accept that something is a mundane explanation, but he doesn't, that's not the work that he really gets into. If you write a book about, tilling plain farmland, it's not very interesting. If you write a book about it, something that's mysterious, that's where you actually get some audience. So he makes sure to write about the things that are mysterious, but I don't think he drums up mystery. If I was to accuse him of anything in those regards, I would say that he can be a little overzealous in accepting evidence that will align with his ideas, and sometimes that'll end up letting people that some people that I personally look at, I'm just like, man, that guy is a grifter, Graham. And Graham will be like, hey, check this guy out. Okay, well, he said the same thing about me, and I'm sure some people think I'm a grifter, so what do you do?
Why Debunking? What's that title all about?
I first saw when I was Milo Rossi was one of the two Milos, and he did a short video where he was like showing how the number one YouTube video at the time, if you looked up Ancient Apocalypse, was his video Debunking part 1, and he goes, get dunked on Graham Hancock, and I was like, well, you got a lot of stuff wrong in that, so let's undo that. Let's dedunk that. And it sounded catchy enough, and seems to be all right. So.
It's funny because you say to your audience, you say, I'm a skeptic and I'm an atheist. And it's like, those are pretty big badges you're wearing there, fella.
Yeah, I know. I get a lot of crap for it, but I really, in this day and age, I honestly think that the whole label thing, it's almost one of the reasons that I like to shout it out, is because the label thing's gotten stupid. I'm the old hippie thing too. If you remember the the Beatles, one of their lines to the song was, "You don't get time to hang a sign on me. You're not going to just get to slap your label on me and use that to judge a person." And I think because of the way that discourse is done nowadays, mostly on the internet, and so we just see individual words, and people have gotten so big about putting those things in their bio, their pronouns or their political affiliations, or I stand with little. I don't believe in a higher power. I don't believe in an intelligent God. I don't believe in I do consider myself a skeptic. I'm not a cynic. I'm not going to be like, it sounds like bullshit, must be bullshit. But if you come with something that sounds like it's a little bit on the woo side, yeah, I'm going to expect you to pull up your sleeves and do some big boy talk here. So
I like that big boy talk. You were very outspoken regarding Flint Dibble and Graham Hancock's interview on Joe Rogan. What was it about Dibble that you felt was conniving and almost underhanded in the manner that he went about his interactions with Hancock?
Well, I had a lot of interactions with Flint before on Twitter, and we'd gotten along well. I got along well enough with most archaeologists for a very long time. It was until about a year of me being on the internet. It was doing this. It was until I covered the whole racism angle and was pointing out that the legs that they were holding up that table with don't exactly hold up to scrutiny. And Flint had he flat out said it just didn't matter. It's like, this doesn't really matter, blah. And that was immediately, I'm like, eh. And then I watched the debate and I see the way he handled Graham saying, "Hey man, you conflate me with being a racist. You know absolutely this is going to get me called a racist." And he's, no, I never said that. Okay, I did say that. Oh, and I knew that was bullshit. And I watched when I watched further, and I knew his position on plants reverting to wild. They call it fertilization, where a plant returns to its wild state, like if you leave rice out in nature that's been domesticated, eventually it'll become wild rice again. And Flint just knee-jerked, "Oh, it's going to take thousands of years." And I knew that wasn't the case. So I started looking for the tells, which aren't really complicated. I mean, a scientist says, like, to take the metallurgy thing, that was one of the big points I hammered on Flint about, is he claimed that you could prove for a fact that there was no metallurgy in the Ice Age, and using the ice cores. And that's simply not the case. And you can tell that's not a scientific statement. You can tell he's not being a scientist. You can, by the way he says it. Any scientist will say, all the data currently indicates that there was no metallurgy in the Ice Age. What we would need to find is blur. But that's not what Flint said. We can prove for a fact. Well, that's not, you're standing behind a pulpit. You're not standing behind a desk educating people anymore. You're preaching. And you just went through with the fine-tooth comb and found enough examples of that to convince me that he went there with knowing that he was full of crap.
Do you think he's a good representative for the archaeological community?
No, I think he's a good representative of the people that put themselves in a position of standing at the megaphone, like Zahi Hawass, which recently proved we'll talk about that in a little bit. But no, we see this with every community on the internet right now. Pick your thing. The one I usually use as an example, because it's so easy to see, is the transgender community. Like here in Spokane, I've seen hundreds of trans people that they're just walking around like normal people. But if I get on the internet, the one that I'm going to see is screaming through GameStop, knocking shit over, going, "Call me ma'am." What's like, okay, well, that's not indicative of the dude that I saw at the magic card store or the girl that I saw at the magic card store. This is an entirely different individual. But just like I was saying about Graham writing about boring farming isn't as cool as a mystery, same shit. If a transgender person lives normal life is a jank headline that does not get clicks. Transgender person screams, destroys GameStop. Same thing with archaeologists. Archaeologist says, interesting data, perhaps Graham Hancock right, probably not. Doesn't get clicks. Archaeologist says Graham Hancock is an idiot racist, clicks.
Yeah, totally. When Ancient Apocalypse 1 came out, the Archaeological Society wrote a letter to Netflix. I don't know if you heard about this.
Oh, yeah.
And basically said that you are discouraging future archaeologists. You are lying to the people. Graham Hancock is a false prophet. I mean, I think they even said that he was a racist.
That was actually the argument that I used when I was debunking that was the Society for American Archaeology's letter to Netflix, was when I made the video that's debunking their racist position. That was my, I used that as their stereotypical argument.
I mean, do you think that's kind of like they're fearful of his impact or is it more that, I mean, I think The first series garnered around 40 to 60 million views, something outrageous.
I think it's more about envy. When I was on Sedona about a month ago with Graham on stage talking to a bunch of people, and one of the things that I said there was nobody knows what happened 10,000, 12,000 years ago. So you have Graham writing his fiction, and then you have these archaeologists writing a fiction, and the archaeologists have the right letters next to their name. Graham has the wrong letters, but his sells better. That's gotta hurt, man. You know, that's like I went to school to be a professional musician all my life, and some dude comes in and shakes his hips, and now he's the king of rock and roll, and I'm just his studio bitch. That's gonna poke some people in the ego. And as we've seen from some of these people, very clearly the two big names there, Flint Dibble and Zahi Hawass, both of those guys, their egos are just gigantic, and they do not handle being challenged whatsoever, which is the antithesis of science. I mean, for fuck's sake, the scientific method goes out of its way to eliminate individuality from the findings. So when somebody comes in there with like a huge ego, they're kind of a problem to the whole process. And that's from somebody from outside the whole situation. But I can say it as an electrician. We worked in applied science. If we're like, hey man, I'm trying to troubleshoot this, and I'm getting this, and you went and tested it, and you found that, but are you sure you tested it right? If the guy's not willing to accept that maybe he made a mistake, man, you're liable to be there all day. So to me, it's just no brainer shit. But they kind of get away with that because at the end of the day, I had to make that light work, and all they got to do is put ink on a paper. It can say anything.
I have had a number of different Egyptologists on my program. A lot of them are much more flexible than Zahi Hawass. Let's talk about him for a minute. He was just on Rogan's program and really said some pretty outrageous things. Do you think he's a good representative for Egyptology?
No, but sadly, he is absolutely the representative for the gatekeeping that field is going through right now. He is instrumental in that field. So while he's not a good representative of it, it's like you could imagine if you've ever had a job where you had one really hard boss and then everybody else there was cool people, but the boss was just a if the boss left, the place would still run just fine. That's kind of how I see Zahi Hawass. Egyptology would be going on just fine with that. It would actually be going better without him. Things like Gutenberg's robot and stuff. That door, it wouldn't have taken them 9 years to go back. It probably took them 9 months. But Zahi Hawass is like, we got to make sure we do this and that. Anyway, the robot was the door in the Queen's Chamber, and I think it was 9 years from the time that the first one went there till the second one went back.
You're talking about the shafts. He went up to the robot went up to the shafts to determine what it was. I mean, that's a while ago.
Yeah, the 90s is when the first one went. It was years before the second one.
Hawass is still telling people that the Khufu pyramid was a tomb. Right now, most engineers understand, and I'm talking about people like Christopher Dunn, and there's been a number of people since him, believe that the Great Pyramids at Giza were some form of machinery. Why is it so hard for people like Zahi Hawass to consider that?
Well, I think probably the biggest reason it's hard for him to consider that is that it goes against what the other funerary places are. I mean, it's like he's taught that this is a funerary site, and so he goes and he sees a tomb that has chambers like this, and then he goes and sees on a wall a painting of chambers like that leading down to a sarcophagus, and then he sees chambers like that in the pyramid, and he was told that it's, this looks like a sarcophagus. It is kind of the default position for the pyramids, is just to assume that they're tombs until you start looking into them. Both him and Mark Lenner, they got a lot of money from the Edgar Cayce Foundation. I don't know if you're aware of that.
Didn't they get educated from that? That's what they paid for their college.
Yep. And so it's very interesting how Zahi Hawass, according to the internet, every now and again he'll still go yabber on their Edgar Cayce Foundation's speaking events. I think the last one was like 2018 or something like that, but there's a quote that I like to use of his a lot where he says, he's talking about the loss of tourism after Arab Spring. And he says, no matter what is happening bad in Egypt, those New Age people, they will come. So I think that motivates a lot of what he's got going on, and I honestly think that that's part of. I think that he plays that angle a little bit, putting up stiff opposition to new discoveries and things like that. That it promotes tourism, and at the end of the day, really, it's a lot to us. It's amazing, mysterious thing. But if you live in Egypt and like you come of age one day and you notice that there's this mountain in the backyard that I can just mine for money by poking at tourists and stuff. I mean, it's a whole different thing. So I do get cynical when I think about the money getting involved in tourism and stuff. Wandering Wolf recently did a great video. Mike Collins, he did a great video of showing how messed up how these sites. You're about to go to Turkey, you'll see it there. How Göbekli Tepe ain't set up for excavating. It's set up for you to buy a ticket, walk around the place, and then get the out, buy a little gift card, and go home.
Yeah.
That's sad, but again, if you live in Turkey, you come of age one day, check out all these T-pillars. I've been driving past them since I was 5, but
I mean, I'm curious though. I mean, we've had people on here who have scanned the Giza plateau, discovered underground tunnel systems. There's even one guy, William Brown, who believes that there's a temple in the middle between the Sphinx and the pyramids. What would stop tourists coming? That would increase the tourism if they were to reveal
but
stuff.
What if they didn't find it? I think honestly, I think that's what scares them the most is they're paying attention to the old tale of the goose that laid the golden egg. My best example for that would be the hidden chamber that they found with the muon scans in the Great Pyramid, right? What happens if that's, I mean, if the tombs alone hypothesis is correct, and that's probably where the body would be, right? I mean, it wouldn't be in the King's Chamber any old jackass could locate. It's going to be in the one that you got to freaking use lasers and shit to find, right? You get stardust to find. It's going to be expensive, potentially damaging this great site that we already make a lot of money off of. And if I open it up and I find that body, man, for the next six months to a year, we're going to have a shitload of tourism. And then all those new age people, they might stop coming. They might be like, oh, fuck. Same thing with this potential hidden temple, right? But if I just leave that mystery, I just let it go, just leave it there. Every now and again, I'll sate my bosses by going down to this little half-assed tunnel under the Sphinx. Let's go this little hole in the ground. Yep, nothing here, see? And but in reality, I think that he is very much invested in promoting a mystery. And same with Göbekli Tepe. I mean, the sites like Göbekli Tepe and the pyramids and stuff, they are connected hand in hand to the mysteries that are around them. Stonehenge gets as many visitors more visitors than a lot of the castles over there. Clearly, one is more impressive than the other, but one's more interesting to people than the other because of the mystery involved. We know who built that, who built this.
Zahi was very negative regarding the SAR scan, the synthetic aperture radar scan, that these two Italians and one Irishman promoted. And I thought that it would be a promotion for the Khafre pyramid, which is not typically thought of as much of a tourist site. But he summarily rejected any of the data. What do you say to that?
Well, it's to be expected. Flint did the same thing where it was just a knee-jerk reaction, calling it bullshit. Me and him and I and Milo Rossi and Jimmy Corsetti were all on Piers Morgan talking about it shortly after the announcement was made. And Flint and Zahi both have the same. It's a knee-jerk position, not based on the science. It's based on an old understanding of the science. That's really what's funny about it. Like I did a video covering it, and it took me the better part of a week to research just the synthetic aperture radar. It's not something I was real familiar with, but the big deal there is that like when they first started using it, they used analog computers and they got fuzzy images, but they had an idea. Then they started using better computers, real computers, and pretty soon they were getting some pretty high definition images. Then they started using that with some other technology like Doppler tomography, and they started getting down to where they could fly over the same place twice. And this is something you can find on NASA's website, that you can use a SAR data to fly over the same place twice and map changes in the landscape up to 2 centimeters. I mean, from space. That's pretty fucking impressive compared to just in the 70s when I was born. They would take an image and the image would be like a little blob, and there was a chart they would use. This blob is probably a Soviet tank. This blob is probably a helicopter.
Right. Okay.
I mean, it was bad. Now they can map it down to 2 centimeters. And this next step, these guys are using a lot of the same stuff, flying over it twice, using Doppler, but they're saying that they are mapping the changes in the topography, and they're using that with the changes that the hollows in the earth make as the earth shifts over time and stuff, and they're using AI to put together what's going on under the earth. Now, compared to where the technology was 10 years ago, yeah, that's a hell of a jump. But it's AI, man. Compared to where video editing was 10 years ago, we're at a hell of a different place, man. Music editing. Imagine all the you've heard these song mashups where they have Johnny Carson or they have Johnny Cash singing Barbie Girl and shit like that. You heard that stuff?
Some of it, yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Well, that's my point. That's parodies are not where they were 10 years ago, thanks to AI. So they reject. This just can't be. It has all to do with the science. It has everything to do with the report. If this was them saying we'd found some big void underneath this site out in the middle of nowhere, and oh my God, maybe there's a cave system. Hey, this is some really interesting technology. I wonder if this SAR stuff is really working well or not. But instead, it's the pyramids, it's Giza, and it's all attached to Atlantis and all that. They're going to knee-jerk everything right out of there as soon as they can.
I mean, it seems to me that there's a big problem for the Antiquities Department in Egypt because they're not able to control the narrative. And the other thing that I think is funny is that they're angry that the Italians didn't ask permission. They just they just picked up the data from the satellite and said, we're gonna process this.
That's one of the reasons. If you want to get conspiratorial about this stuff, I think that would be one reason to poo-poo this technology right out the gate. I mean, think about the sites in China, for example, where they're like, oh, there's a pyramid over in China, but the Chinese government ain't letting nobody, like, yeah, you, China, fly right over the top. Yep. or you would get all political about it. You got all these UN inspectors trying to go to Iraq, like, no, you can't. Okay, you, Iraq. Okay. We've flown over. We took pictures. We know what you've got. So I think, this technology is the kind of thing that if it's actually doing what they're saying it's going to do, man, it's going to be lucrative shit. It's going to be very, very lucrative because, I mean, think about how much money it costs to put a bunch of guys on the ground with LiDAR drones and stuff and then feed them and drive them out or just buy the data from the satellite that flew over it a year ago. I mean, come on, this is cake, right? Cake.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Cake.
What do you think of the interpretation of the Khafre pyramid? I mean, some of the people are saying, I mean, they kind of blew it. The Italians sent out a press release that said, there's an underground city. That's like ridiculous. But what do you say from what you've seen so far?
Well, I think Christopher Dunn put it really well when him and I talked about it a little bit. Even though we disagree on a lot of things, especially ancient high technology, me and Chris get along well and have a pretty strong mutual respect for each other. And we were discussing this. And he said that honestly, the thing that's the most interesting to him isn't the idea of it being cities and tunnels underneath nearly as much as it is the natural honeycombed landscape that you have underneath the Nile Plateau or the Giza Plateau. All the bedrock, the limestone there is crisscrossed with caves. And he's interested to see how much of those have things hidden in it, how much of those were used by humans, recarved by humans. Like he basically what he said is that even from like a mainstream Egyptological perspective, there is potentially something here. Now, when it gets to those spiral staircases and straight columns and stuff, and this is where we're talking about AI again. Remember the early days of AI images, and the faces were a little distorted, and the fingers were actually. All right, here we go. Give them some time; they'll get there.
Graham Hancock's one of many people who have spoken on the potential for advanced ancient civilizations. There's other individuals like John Anthony West, Robert Schoch, and I mean, I could go on and on. Robert Bauval spoke in great detail about the alignment of the pyramids. Does it feel to you, and if you're a fan of Graham Hancock, this should be a natural, but I'm just curious, is there really a link to a lost advanced civilization on Earth?
I think there is. I don't think it's nearly as advanced as most people in our community think it is. I think that they would be what we would consider very low technology today. But I think that they were good at seafaring. I think they were good with math and good with astronomy. and that these, good at being a team of people working on a boat. I think that honestly, that those skills would translate pretty quickly into raising big rocks that were aligned to the stars. This is the kind of thing that they would be well situated to do. And historically, we've seen that if you have the better astronomy, you can supplant somebody else's astronomy and thereby their religion pretty easily. I mean, there was a guy, a Jesuit priest, that traveled to China. I forget his name, but he was the first person allowed in the Forbidden City that was from outside. He was never allowed to meet the emperor because of the way things were, but he was the first foreigner buried in a Buddhist tomb and with a Buddhist shrine and everything. He was very well honored, and the reason was because the Chinese emperor's his validity on the throne was directly tied to his ability to predict the future. So the Chinese emperors had thousands of astronomers up on top of the temple. There's still a bunch of astrolabes and shit up there from back in those days. And this guy came there and predicted the eclipses better than all of his astronomers did. So that right there, now all of a sudden his astronomy is the best. So my point is I don't think these people had to have like massive technology in order for them to come in and been considered a whole step above. All they had to do was be like, hey man, you want to know when to plant? Just wait another 2 weeks. When the sun rises into that star, and all of a sudden, holy this guy could speak to the gods, right?
Yeah. You bring up another topic that is really a tough one for me, and archaeologists just flat out refuse it, which is diffusion. And I am a big proponent of the Maya and the Olmec and Mesoamerica culture, ancient culture, as being multiracial, multicultural. I mean, it looks like African-centric, Asian-centric, Caucasian types all blended in a very, very early period, thousands of years ago. Why do you think it's so hard for archaeologists to consider migrating people?
Well, there's a few reasons. I think one of them is they've got a framework already established, and that framework's very nice and neat, and it starts getting pretty shitty if instead of one Clovis event and them crossing the Bering Land Bridge, now you got a bunch of boats going across and all these different, oh boy, that's a whole lot more of a mess. Another one is in all honesty, there has been a lot of traditionally, and I hate to say it because some people don't jump on and be like, oh, you're just like Flint Dibble, but there has been a lot of white supremacy stuff associated with that stuff in the past. And I don't mean Atlantis hunting. I mean, like, this is the case of Dighton Rock that's over on the east coast of the United States. And it was first found in like the late 17 or late 1600s. And the markings on it were assumed to, there's no way that an Indian could figure out how to carve one rock on another, was honestly literally the interpretation at first. So they were looking for Vikings, and even today, while almost every academic will consider it a product of the Native Americans, the Portuguese people that live in the area have the claim to the rock. And there's a lot of these kinds of things where it has been attached to some kind of ugly ideas, and the more politically woke the world, especially the scientific community, gets, the less likely they are to entertain anything that's attached to that. Like, we've seen them do the same thing with like biblical stuff. If it even smells at all like it might be related to the Bible, they're just going to push that out for. Yeah, I could make a whole presentation about that. I mean, good God, but as an atheist, but I honestly think that a big part of it is just. Like I said earlier, man, they wrote a fiction, and it's not the right one. Look at what Thor Heyerdahl, if you know who he is.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
He went through all kinds of help. Correct. Kon-Tiki. And he said that the Easter Island, the walls that the Moai were on, the old wall looked very much like the one in Peru in Sacsayhuaman. And he's like, I wonder if these, cultures were connected. And they're like, oh, no, this can't be. Which, first of all, how stupid is it? If they found this tiny little dot in the ocean, how the could they not find South America? You guys, come on. This doesn't even make any sense. But on top of that, then now we get genetics, and all of a sudden it's like, well, okay, yeah, supposedly in the earliest habitable layer there was ginger and sweet potatoes. So they had Asian and South American foods as early as we know that humans showed up on Easter Island. In addition to that, there is a genetic signal that shows there was people from the Americas interbreeding with them and vice versa. So for Heyerdahl is vindicated, but he wasn't for a very long time. As you know, he fought an uphill battle because what he was saying, it wasn't even outlandish. I mean, we know people made it there. Well, they couldn't have made it here. They only made it here from one direction. It's the new world has to be isolated for some reason, and I don't. The more that we see, like you pointed out with South America, there are so many things that that appear. You know, I've heard some people argue the Olmec heads don't look so African. So if you don't want to go with that, fine. But there's no question that there is depictions of people with full beards, and there's no question there are depictions of people that are extremely Middle Eastern / Southeast Asian in appearance. Extremely in some of these cases, where it's like, dude, if you didn't tell me this is from South America, I would have guessed this was some weird knockoff of a freaking Assyrian item or something. I mean, it's weird.
I mean, it's almost like they have to find the ruins of a sunken Phoenician ship off of Mexico, or some weights or anchors of some kind.
Oh yeah, and even then they might deny it. I mean, it's one of the funny things that they'll say a lot. It's one of the interesting things about science to me is that they like to use the term proxies. Well, we haven't found any proxies for that. That's just a fancy way of saying that this is a one-off. We ain't seen nothing else like it. And it's kind of an extreme example, but the Antikythera mechanism is a fucking one-off. We don't have any proxies for it. But nobody's claiming that it's fake. Nobody's claiming that aliens, in the scientific community, nobody's claiming aliens built it or anything. They just accept that, this is a one, that we don't have any proxies for this yet. Here it is. So it basically, this is an argument that is used to humans like rules. And you see that rule that Carl Sagan put out there, that, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And that's fair. But what qualifies an extraordinary claim, in my opinion, it's like Easter Island being reached by humans. That's not an extraordinary claim, but it was expected to jump through the extraordinary evidence hoop. Clovis first being overturned. It's not an extraordinary claim, but over and over again, that was the argument. Oh, we don't have any proxies for the Bluefish Caves. Oh, we don't have any proxies for this site either. Now we got 6 sites that are all the same that we have no proxies for. It's ridiculous, but it's Scientists are humans, and they're going to do all the same stupid humans do.
Is it just that they have to rewrite history to accept diffusion, migrating cultures, or is it the fact that it's too much for them to comprehend?
I honestly, I don't know if it's too much to comprehend. I think it would be easier for some of them to just accept that side of things, if it was, especially the guys that aren't so attached to the framework. Like, if Flint wasn't all into getting on the internet and arguing with people, he would be into Seeds and Bones and stuff. You wouldn't be hearing much about him in the realm of the grand scheme of things. He wouldn't really care if the world was connected or not. It's not going to change what he does with a seed or a bone.
Yeah.
I think really what it comes down to is egos. Like, let's revisit the Society for American Archaeology letter. Now, if I was to tell you that the 3 things that they complained to Netflix about was the way that the evidence was quote unquote misrepresented, the way that what Graham had to say was racist, and the way that what Graham had to say was mean to archaeologists, you would think that it would probably come in the order I just gave it to you, but it don't. It comes in, Graham was mean to archaeologists, he got some wrong, and he's racist. It's like very clearly ego first. And the same with Flint. When he whines to anybody, you hear it very quickly. He did the thing defending Zahi Hawass on Joe Rogan. And at the beginning of the section where he says, oh, now it's time for me to criticize Zahi Hawass. Zahi, you might want to turn away from this. Well, he really threw his other colleagues under the bus quite a bit. He disagreed with his it has all to do with him getting evidence and facts wrong. It has everything to do with him saying other archaeologists didn't discover it. I discovered it. That was Flint's. It's ego. Ego is what drives these people to do the stupid shit that's unscientific that makes me make videos about them.
That brings up an interesting topic. It seems that when there are dates that exceed what they consider the norm, what the community thinks of the norm, then they have they have a cow. I'm thinking of Ganoom Penang, where Danny Hillman got in there and he did everything by the book. He used carbon dating. He used all kinds of scientific evidence, and he dates the earliest part of Gunung Penang, this pyramid, to 24,000 years ago. And the archaeologists are finding every avenue they can to disprove this data, and I don't think they can go very far. But what do you feel about Gunung Penang?
The problem with the way that Gunung Penang was excavated, or Gunung Penang, or however it's pronounced, they're rejecting the handful of artifacts. The Kajong stone, and there's a couple of stones that look like they might have been like weights for Ebola or fishing weights or something like that. They're rejecting those as artifacts, saying these aren't worked stones. So they're rejecting the older dates because they took core samples, because Dr. Nadi Wajawa was a geologist. So he took core samples and had his archaeologist friend, Dr. Ali Akbar, to look at the stuff with them. But, it's kind of a stereotypical picture of an archaeologist on a site is you got those people over there shaking screens, right? And they're looking for tiny little pieces, like they call them microchips. If you're like flaking off a piece of stone to make a weapon or a tool, you knock off flakes in a very specific manner. These could be very small, but they're still technically artifacts. They're proof that humans were working the stone. So they look for these things in the debris, and there was nobody doing that there. So it left them a big fat hole. They were able to easily say, we'll reject these 3 or 4 artifacts out of hand, and now we can say that nothing that was found there was right. So basically what it comes down to is you see the same thing written about Jacques Cinq-Mars, who was the first scientist, the first archaeologist to challenge Clovis first. Basically challenge every bit of evidence that you bring up instead of coming at it appearing like I'm just attacking the whole concept of this. They just challenge every single bit of evidence and then say, well, what are you even talking about? You don't have any proof of what you're saying. This just seems like a bunch of bullshit to me. Instead of saying 25,000-year-old pyramid, that's stupid. They say this isn't an artifact, this isn't an artifact, this isn't an artifact, and you don't have anything else. That's what you got. Your carbon dating, it's just grass in the dirt. That's it. You got 25,000-year-old grass. Good job. That's their position. I could go off for hours on how they did this to the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. Very, very sneaky, effective way to getting skeptical people to reject it out of hand. They've done a lot of that kind of stuff. And yet
the Younger Dryas hypothesis has been backed by conventional science for quite a few years. And you're part of that. I don't know. Are you talking on the Younger Dryas at the Cosmic Summit?
I'm going to mention it, but I'm not going to be like one of the big Younger Dryas people there. I'm not part of the Comet Research Group or anything. No.
Right. What do you say to that scientific community who says that it's not valid? There was no asteroid impact, and it didn't. One of the big evidentiary facts is that there seems to be a terminating event during this Younger Dryas, where the megafauna, the big land animals, die off by the tens of millions. And we don't really know what humanity is there, but if there's any humans that are around, then they're wiped out for the most part. But what's your feeling on that?
Well, it's pretty interesting. I'm still, I'm hoping the scientific community eventually comes to more of a consensus on the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. Although right now I'm certain that it's going to be a while, because they are two distinct camps arrayed against each other, and when that happens, stuff can get ugly and last for a very long time. The Clovis first debacle took like 30 years for them to figure it out from the time we got our first bit of evidence. So as far as the overhunting hypothesis, the idea that humans wiped out all of that's the alternative theory. Generally speaking, archaeologists will say that it was usually overhunting hypothesis. And now, to play devil's advocate, there is one thing that I don't ever hear discussed with this, is you always hear people talking about how, they came up with the Clovis points and they killed everything. But we would make humans, especially things like bison and mammoth, we would make these rock, basically runs. We would corral the animals to run towards cliffs. And so then we could herd the animals and get them to run this direction, and they're all going to run off a cliff. And we were done. And we got what we needed. We didn't take the walls apart. We just left them there and came back next year. And so if 100 elephants walked off that thing in the meantime, 100 elephants walked off that thing in the meantime, and it. So there is going to be more death. We were pretty efficient at wiping things out. So there is some legitimacy to the idea that we could have really things up. But Then you got the carnivores. I don't see the saber-toothed cats and the dire wolves and all that shit following these things off the cliff. These are a little bit more smarter animals. They would be finding their way down to get to that meat. All the animals aren't going to be that easily led. So it's, to me, it seems like there was certainly something else up, especially the way that the Clovis culture, or the Clovis point, however you want to look at it, the Clovis toolkit disappears from the record at that time, and we end up, at least in most of the Americas, we end up with the Folsom culture at that time, which is kind of a the Folsom point is like a Clovis point, but it's made for smaller game. I mean, there's the big shit's all gone now. So
it's funny that you say that, because I mean, that's one excuse, but then you look at these bone yards where there's millions of bones in Alaska that are being dug up. There's Siberian animals that are flash frozen. It's something really geologically strange happened.
Absolutely.
During this younger, drier event, and they don't seem to be looking at that.
No, they again, this things get attached to old ideas. That's one of the things I'll be talking about quite a bit at the Cosmic Summit. And I'll give you a quick example now. Like in the 1800s, science was expected to prove the Bible right. And so you get Charles Darwin coming along, and I forget the geologist's name, but he was basically right around the same time. And they were very similar ideas, very slow, steady changes, as opposed to these dramatic God did it things. This geologist came along, and he was like talking about weathering and erosion as opposed to flash floods to create these Grand Canyons and things like this. And pretty much overnight, it changed the way that science was supposed to view these kinds of events. And a technical term for it was catastrophism. This is catastrophic, and then they changed it to gradualism. And these were mutually exclusive in the minds of science all the way up until 1980 with the KT disaster, where they finally were like, okay, yeah, the KT meteor killed, when Alvarez proved that the meteor killed the dinosaurs, when science accepted that, they were like, we need to come up with a new idea. We'll call it punctuated equilibrium. Usually things go like this, but every now and again it's punctuated by some catastrophe. And it's like a fucking 5-year-old could go stand at the beach for a day and be like, well, usually the water just kind of does this, but every now and again a big wave comes. I mean, come the fuck on. But it took them over 140 years because of this like idea in their head, their collective heads, this knee-jerk reaction to we cannot prove the Bible right. So and it's not just the Bible that this happens with. It's any time that they find themselves, we saw it recently in the medical community, they find themselves in a position, they array themselves in two different camps. And even today, if you go look up the top 10 retracted papers that are still being cited in published papers today, they're all medical, because there's two teams in there arguing that we don't even hear about anymore. They're arguing back and forth over 2020 still. So yeah, that's what science does. They and I don't get me wrong, I'm not saying science sucks. I'm saying that you get these protracted, egotistical arguments that come up, and it slows everything down for decades. It happens over and over and over again because people are people. We just do the same shit over and over again. Okay. The old saying: those who know history, those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it, and those who do know history are doomed to stand by and watch others repeat it. And that's pretty much where we are.
Amazing. I want to talk a little bit about megalithic Montana. I had a chance to go there a couple of years ago, and I didn't go with the owner, but I went with a Julie Ryder and saw this sage wall, and I saw a number of what geologists say are natural formations, and there's just no way. I mean, I saw it's called the Tizer Dolmen, and there's no way in hell that was laid by a moving glacier. There's no way. The thing's amazing. The
Tizer Dolmen's pretty crazy.
I know you were just there and you don't want to talk a lot about it because you're doing your own thing, but talk about at least the Tizer, because I found that thing was just outrageous.
Yeah, I'm waiting about 4 weeks to 6 weeks to cover the Sage Wall at the request of the property owner. The Tizer Dolmen, I'm going to be covering that one pretty quickly here. It was really interesting. It was the way that it's situated and stuff. The rock on top, be skeptical. You walk around and almost everywhere there you can look and see, okay, well, this ran into that and it knocked down this and this piece sloughed off of that. You could see where a lot of things just kind of fell into place. You can put the pieces together, but the rock on top of this dolmen is like on the side of a damn hill, and there's trees around it, and then there's blue sky, and it's like, where the did that rock come from? Somebody pick it up and put it there, but that rock's weighs as much as a Volkswagen or something. I'm old. A couple thousand pounds, and a metric ton, whatever the system we're using nowadays. But at least 3 drafts, and it went up on top of that. That dolmen's probably 30 feet high or so. I mean, you were there. It's impressive. But if you look at the dolmen, you can see in the front of it, there's a rock that's laying down, and you can see there's a rock up against the back where you can kind of see how it got split, where it was like a rock fell up and smacked into that thing, knocked a piece off the front, and busted it open. So it's a really interesting area. There's a lot to talk about as far as geology and potential archaeology goes, as far as up on that part of the country. The problem is that I know from living in the Pacific Northwest, the locals get to these sites long before the scientists do, and by the time the scientists get there, there's nothing left. The fire pits that they're investigating were left there 2 weeks ago by partying kids. They're not, they got nothing to do with ancient history, so it makes it difficult.
Yeah, you were there with Jimmy Corsetti, and
yep.
I mean, I don't think that they've done a LiDAR scan or any ground penetrating radar. Well, I think they have done ground penetrating radar, but it's old enough that most of it that would define it is probably under the surface, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, as far as the wall or the dolmen?
The wall.
Oh, the wall,
and that whole area.
Well, yeah, it's tough to say. The geologists say that all that stuff was covered with dirt and then it slowly eroded down. That's how they explain things like that dolmen, for example. They say, "Oh, you just formed like that, and then the dirt eroded off of it," which I ain't buying that on that one there either, just because of how precariously it's balanced. But the thing with the wall is there's one side of it is like a retaining wall, like you saw. I'm sure that one side of it is like holding dirt back, and then the other side is like down, where it doesn't seem like erosion's what did it, or you would think it would have eroded both sides pretty equally.
Yeah, but I think that there's been somebody with some kind of ground penetrating radar.
Yeah, that's one of the things that hopefully we'll get some information on within the next month. There was some LiDAR done. Chris, the property owner, he showed all of us one LiDAR image, and that there's more. They're having them interpreted or processed or whatever. He's a little bit leery, and I understand, because you send something like this to scientists. I advise him to send it without telling them where it was. If he could send it to PhD students, because you tell them, "Hey man, here's this stage wall place," and they go Google it. They're like, "Oh no, this is totally natural. Here you go." So it'll be interesting to see. I'm waiting for the data to come out. Those kinds of things, I always look for the more mundane explanations first. But the wall's definitely interesting, even if it is totally natural. It's very unique in the fact that it's just such a straight run. And if you look next to it, it seems like there was another one that kind of formed a trough at one point. I think I took enough pictures that I can put that together pretty well. But like where the wall is, if you look across, there's like that little valley where it is, and then on the other side where it starts to go up, you can see where there's a bunch of rocks that look like it may have been. They were definitely standing up, and it may have been another wall. It's hard to tell now, but it may have been another wall there. And so, a lot of the people when we were there were talking about it possibly being a channel or a canal or something that had been formed through there. I don't know. It's awfully big, and you do see a lot of rocks that do that same thing in the region, where all that granite breaks in very straight, very uniform ways because it's so much quartz in it. So, but the wall itself is just so. What it got me more and over was its size and its straightness. It wasn't like other things like that I'd looked up coming there. It was.
How can that be natural? It's so long. It's so perfectly. I'm fitted with stones. It's almost, obviously there's some of these stones that are like fitted so they support the base stone. You know what I mean? There's logic behind it. It's not like a natural phenomenon. How could it be natural? It's like, come on, man, really?
Yeah, I mean, I took some pictures of some areas that were nearby when we were going and looking for the dolmen, because I'm looking at both sides of it, and like I saw one place where I forget. It's got the two pink granite stones that are pink. Okay, you know that spot that I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And there's like, those are all like uniform looking blocks, like
exactly.
Little, like, you could see where it's fallen apart and stuff there. And it's caused. It seems like it's caused by water erosion. Like water gets in between these blocks, and then it fills it full of pine needles and all kinds of shit, and then it soaks during the winter, and then it freezes, and then it just repeats over and over, and then it slowly splits these apart. How uniform some of these sites are, that's where it gets interesting, and that's where, even if it is a natural phenomena, it needs to be investigated. I mean, some things can look uncannily, man-made and not be. Probably the best examples get when, like, the easiest to show are when you get down to the microscopic world. If I show you a picture of a plankton, a thing looks like a D12 for playing Dungeons and Dragons with, right? I mean, it's like perfectly the dodecahedron shit, right? So nature's a weird duck, man. I don't know what to say for sure, but it's in situ. I'm not 100% either way on the sage wall. I do lean towards it being. I definitely see signs of it being natural. But it's uncanny. It's like the Bimini Road in those regards. It's uncanny and warrants more investigation, but won't get the investigation that it deserves because it's going to be forever associated with woo. And so that's it is.
Too bad.
It's one of the saddest things about it because they close down archaeological departments all over the world right now. Flint's out of a job or whatever. I don't know exactly, but they closed the department that he was working in. If you cater to people that actually bought that kind of stuff, you actually made interesting content for the masses, you might find that your department generates a profit, and then you have a job. I know it's capitalist and evil, but it beats starving and holding up a sign and doing real archaeology on Twitter, doesn't it? I mean, so to me, it's like a no-brainer. But Carl Sagan understood this all too well. He wrote books about aliens because he knew that it would sell. And you're like, I'm not really into science, but I like aliens. And he's like, you're not into science? Spoonful of sugar, bitch. Medicine, science, eat it, eat more. You will learn science. If you like Star Wars, you're learning science. He understood how to do that. And these archaeologists, to a man, they got no clue how to do that.
Hey, Dan, it's been fun speaking with you. I know we talked before we started. You're not sure what day you're speaking, but the Cosmic Summit is June 20th to the 23rd. You can go to cosmicsummit.com, get your tickets. Most of you guys can't be there, but if you go to the streaming section, they got a streaming pass for $75. That seems like a lot of money, but if you're thinking about covering all of the talks over 3 days, it's pretty cheap. And you can see it live from anywhere you're sitting, as long as you have an internet connection, and I really urge you to do it. Dan will be there, I think 2 of the 3 days. You're going to be there.
Yep. I'm doing a presentation, and I'm doing a live debate with Randall Carlson and David Sig Hansen and Dr. Danny Hillman, Nadia Wajawa, and I don't know, some other people too. Sorry. For those of you I forgot, sorry.
That's good. No, so check out cosmicsummit.com, and you'll see Dan and a really pretty good lineup. And I've told you guys before, Cosmic Summit is really the only quality conference in the whole country for this year, 2025. So definitely check it out. Hey, Dan, I want to see a book coming out of you one of these days. I think you got one in you.
Oh, well, thank you, Cliff. I will get to work on that. I've been thinking about it for a bit. So
yeah, like hell, man. It's like you're gonna sit down and go, I'm gonna dedicate 3 hours a day to writing. Believe me, I tell you, it's a challenge.
I'll get one of those. Back in my day, you had to buy one of those Dragon softwares. Now you just yell at your computer, "Hey Siri, start typing."
Or you can have one of those AI books written where you give it a chapter and then it puts together a book for you. All right, man. Thanks.
I'm so sorry. Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks.